What's up, everyone? Good to have you back. I'm sorry it's been a little bit since I posted last, but it was kind of a difficult schedule recently. You know, we had one day where we barely did anything, and I was like, well, I'm not gonna post about nothing. And then we had another day where we did tons and tons of stuff. Thanks for sticking with me. I'm glad you tuned in. So after Petra, which we talked about last time, we woke up a little bit sore in our calves, but we were ready for the next stage of our journey, which was moving from Jordan to Israel. Now, along the way, we got the opportunity to stop by a few things. One of those that was pretty cool was the remains of a Crusader castle, which was called Montreal. You can think about the city of Montreal in Canada. It's actually the same name. It means a royal mountain. It was a castle that was built by the first Crusader king, Baldwin I. He was the first king of the Kingdom of Jerusalem after the First Crusade. And we also got to see some super cute kids and their goats. So that was pretty cool. After a few hours of driving, we finally hit the Israeli-Jordanian border. So ours was a commercial and tourist crossing, which means we didn't have to go through the official border. It was still super intense. The Israelis are very serious about their security. They've had to fight a number of wars in the past several decades, and so because of that, they're very careful about who they let in and how they let them in. We left our guide and our driver, and then we took all of our luggage through passport control. First, of course, they had to scan our luggage, they had to do some security screening, metal detectors and all of that good stuff. But then we had to go through what they call passport control, and they issued us some special visas, which look a little bit like this. And we have to carry our cards with us wherever we go in Israel to make sure that if we get stopped at a checkpoint, and soldiers might come on, like they did at one checkpoint, that we can show them who we are, how long we're gonna be in Israel, and what we're planning on doing. It's pretty intense, but then we met up with our new driver and our new guide, Tony, who gave us some new maps and some new hats. And after that, we set out for our first destination, the ancient city of Magdala. The next day was super packed with so much to see, and so we set out early. Now, of course, there is a lot to see in Galilee because this is where Jesus performed the bulk of his public ministry. We started the day by taking a boat ride on the Sea of Galilee, which was such a cool experience. We got to experience kind of what the disciples themselves would have experienced with Jesus in their boat. The boats that we were riding in were modeled after some of the ancient boats that people like Peter and Andrew might have used to go fishing in the Sea of Galilee. So on a beautiful, peaceful morning, we listened as Tony told us about the Sea of Galilee and about the lush region around it. And we prayed the Psalms using morning prayer from the Liturgy of the Hours. It was a really cool thing to think about, that just as Jesus would have prayed these same psalms with his disciples as he would have done every day, that maybe he did that even in a boat just like we were doing in that moment. Super cool. After docking back on shore, we then made it to Tabka, which is named for the 7 springs that feed the Sea of Galilee. We got the opportunity to visit the Church of the Primacy of Peter and to celebrate a beautiful outdoor mass there, where we remembered how Jesus appeared to Peter after the resurrection and called him to be the rock on which the church was built. Inside the Church of the Primacy of Peter, we also got the opportunity to see the rock, which is called Mensa Christi, the table of Christ. When Jesus appeared to his disciples after the resurrection on the shore of the Sea of Galilee, he called them to him, and they didn't recognize him at first. But when they finally did recognize him, he spoke some of my favorite 3 words in the New Testament. Come, have breakfast. We then left that church to drive to another church, the Mount of Beatitudes, to see the beautiful church that is dedicated to Jesus preaching on the mountain and his Sermon on the Mount. The mountain almost forms a little amphitheater where people would have been able to sit and listen to Jesus speaking and preaching about how to be holy, how to be blessed, the Beatitudes. We even did our best to sing a little rendition of a song about the Beatitudes to get into the right spirit. After a short stay there, we hopped on the bus again, this time to go to another church where the feeding of the 5,000 took place. From the earliest days of the church, this was a site that was recognized and venerated by the early Christian community. And so they even marked the spot with a stone, an important stone, around which now a church is built. Some of the monks who helped build the church over the centuries were from Egypt, and so even some of the mosaics within the church feature some of these different motifs that picture scenes from the Nile River. Underneath the altar was the stone that I just talked about, where the miracle actually happened, and how the church is even still built around it. In 2015, a fanatic set fire to the church and tried to burn it down, but the stone that was underneath the altar is a little bit blackened, but it's still there, as is the church. After that, we stopped for a delicious lunch, but I'm actually gonna save that one for another video coming a little bit later for you foodies. After lunch, we drove to Kursi, which is in a region of Israel known as the Golan Heights, where there's sort of a contested border between Israel and Syria coming from the 1967 war that they fought against each other. There's a pretty heavy military presence there, and even still is marked with various landmine fields. Kursi is important because it's where Jesus drove demons out of a possessed man and into a herd of swine that jumped off of a cliff into the sea. There's an old destroyed monastery that's still there, that's built out of some of the volcanic rock that is so prevalent in the region. There's also the remains of an abandoned chapel that is built on an old pagan tomb where the possessed man had actually hid himself and was living there until the miracle actually took place. The caves along that region are still marked with ancient pagan tombs where this man would have been hiding. Finally, we ended the day with a bang as we went to the city of Capernaum. Capernaum is kind of Jesus' headquarters, his HQ of sorts, and it's where he performed a lot of his important miracles. We can think about some of the healings of the people that took place there. The healing of a woman who had hemorrhages, for example. There are two really important features in the city of Capernaum. One is the church that's built in Capernaum, which is built over the house of Peter's mother-in-law. If you remember from the scriptures, his mother-in-law had a fever, and so Jesus came to his house and healed her. And then she got up and started waiting on them as they continued with their business. The place was so revered by the early church that they built one of the first churches in the world on the site. The modern church is actually built over the top of that ancient church in such a way as not to disturb the ruins of the city. I'm not gonna lie, but it kind of looks like a UFO. The other important feature in the city of Capernaum was the synagogue of Capernaum. The one that we actually have now is built over the top of the ancient synagogue where Jesus would have preached. The ancient synagogue was actually destroyed by the Romans after the Jewish revolt, but you can still see the black volcanic rock of the old synagogue over which the new limestone synagogue is built. This is a place that is really important for us, because this is where Jesus would have taught so many important things in the synagogue. One of those great teachings, of course, was the Bread of Life discourse, where Jesus taught his disciples that even though Moses had given them the manna and bread in the desert, that he was the bread of life. He was going to give us the gift of the Eucharist, which would be the greatest gift and would satisfy any hunger that we would possibly have within our souls. It was truly an awesome experience to be able to sit there where some of the very people who listened to Jesus preach would have sat and listened to that Bread of Life discourse. Well, that's about it. Not much else. But in all seriousness, it was a really packed day, and there's still so much more to come. The interesting thing is that all of these various places and locations, these various churches that we were going to, even though we read in the scriptures that it seems like they're all over the place, that Jesus is constantly moving, it's actually all really close together. It was only about 10 to 15 minutes between every one of these churches that we visited. Well, that's about it for right now. Again, thank you for joining us. Thanks for tuning in. I hope you're enjoying these videos as much as I am enjoying being able to make them and present them to you. Again, remember, like, comment, and subscribe if you want to get some more info about our pilgrimage, and if you want to continue to follow us along. Tomorrow is another pretty packed day. I actually think a lot of these next couple days are going to be super packed. So stick with us, bear with me as I try to get these videos out to you, and I hope you join us again soon. Thanks again. God bless you all.